This is too far. That was all Mookie Betts could say. He didn't say it with a smile. He didn't say it as a joke. He stood near his locker, arms crossed, and stared at the wall for a moment before the words came out. Max Muncy, standing beside him, just shook his head slowly. Neither of them had seen this coming. Not like this. Not this fast. The Dodgers were 3 games away from the Brewers. 3 games that mattered. And Dave Roberts had just turned the entire roster structure upside down in the span of 48 hours. This was not a normal week. It started, as most things do with this Dodgers team, with Shohei Ohtani. It wasn't a press conference. It wasn't a formal meeting with the front office. It was a conversation. The kind that happens in the hallway between the weight room and the trainer's table. The kind that doesn't get written down anywhere but ends up changing everything. Ohtani had watched the last series carefully. He had watched the bullpen. He had watched the matchups. And somewhere between his own preparation and his understanding of what the team needed, he said something to Roberts. Nobody reported the exact words. But the effect was immediate. Within 24 hours, 3 roster moves had been made. Within 48 hours, the relief pitching structure had been reorganized entirely. And at the center of it all was a name that nobody had placed in this role before, Roki Sasaki. Closer. For a moment, let that land. Sasaki had come to the Dodgers this season carrying the weight of expectation that only a certain kind of pitcher carries. He was young. He was electric. He had a splitter that disappeared from the strike zone like it had somewhere better to be. But closing games? That was different. That was the 9th inning with the season breathing down your neck. That was standing on the mound when the margin for error had already disappeared. Roberts had thought about this. You could see it in the way he answered the question when reporters found him before batting practice. He didn't rush his answer. He set both hands flat on the table in front of him. He looked at the reporter directly. We believe in Roki. We believe in what he can do in high-leverage situations. This isn't an experiment. This is a decision. He paused just long enough for the room to feel it. And yes, Shohei was part of that conversation. The room shifted when he said that. Because that was the sentence that changed everything. It wasn't that Ohtani had demanded anything. It wasn't that he had walked into Roberts' office and drawn up a new bullpen chart. That wasn't who he was. But Ohtani sees baseball differently. He sees it the way a pitcher sees a batter's weakness before the batter even realizes it exists. And when he sees something, he doesn't stay quiet about it. What he saw was this: the Brewers were not a team you could beat the same way twice. They adjusted. They remembered. They came back to the plate in the 6th inning having already figured out what you did to them in the 2nd. Against a team like that, predictability wasn't just a weakness. It was a defeat waiting to happen. Sasaki closing games was unpredictability made real. Mookie Betts found out the same way most of the position players did. Not from a meeting. Not from a formal announcement. From a text message, and then from seeing the lineup card. We never expected them to go this far, he said later, standing in the tunnel just off the dugout. His voice wasn't angry. It was something closer to stunned admiration. I mean, we knew things were changing. But this fast? 3 moves in 2 days and now Roki's closing? He shook his head again. That's bold. That's really bold. Muncy echoed him, though in fewer words. He had been standing nearby during the same conversation, arms folded, listening more than speaking. When the reporter turned to him, he just said, "We knew something was coming. We didn't know it would look like this." That was the thing about these 2 days. Nobody did. The 3 roster replacements were not random. That much became clear once you looked at them together. The first was a depth move, the kind that gets buried in the transaction wire at 11 p.m. and only matters later when you realize why it was made. A reliever with high ground ball rates. Exactly the profile you'd want against a Brewers lineup that makes contact. The second was more visible. A positional adjustment that freed up flexibility in the middle of the lineup for the 3-game set. The name wasn't the headline. The timing was. 2 days before the series. Not a week out, not at the deadline. 2 days before. The third was the one that made people stop scrolling. A left-handed specialist, pulled up and placed directly into the high-leverage window of Games 2 and 3. Against a Brewers lineup that had been feasting on right-handed pitching for 3 weeks, that one specific move was the kind of chess move that makes an opposing manager set his coffee down and look at the board again. These weren't 3 coincidences. This was a plan. And the plan had a shape. Roberts, to his credit, didn't pretend otherwise. Later that afternoon, after the full lineup for Game 1 had been posted and the questions had started to pile up, he stood in front of the media and spoke like a man who had already played the series in his head several times over. "The Brewers are very good," he said. "They're disciplined. They make adjustments faster than most teams in the league. If you come at them the same way on Thursday that you came at them on Tuesday, you've already lost something." A reporter asked him directly, was this Ohtani's series to structure? Roberts allowed himself a small smile. Not the kind that deflects. The kind that confirms. Shohei cares deeply about winning. He pays attention to things that help this team win. When he brings something to the conversation, we take it seriously. That's all I'll say about that. That was enough. What does it mean when the best two-way player in the history of the sport starts influencing roster construction? What does it mean when his suggestions don't just land on the manager's desk and disappear, but actually materialize on the lineup card 48 hours later? It means the Dodgers have something that cannot be replicated by any other organization in baseball. Not because of money. Not because of depth. Because of him. Ohtani doesn't just make the lineup better when his name is in it. He makes the organization think differently. He raises the floor of what everyone around him believes is possible. And now, apparently, he raises the ceiling of how boldly the coaching staff is willing to move. Sasaki is closer is bold. 3 roster moves in 48 hours is bold. Doing all of it 3 games before a series against a team that has been one of the best in the National League for 6 weeks is the kind of bold that either looks visionary by Sunday night or becomes the most analyzed mistake of the month. Roberts knows that. He knew it when he made the calls. In the Dodgers clubhouse, the mood was not what you'd expect. There was no tension. No visible anxiety about the changes or the speed at which they happened. If anything, there was something quieter and more purposeful in the air. Sasaki himself was composed in the way that only certain pitchers are composed. Not because they don't feel pressure. Because they've already made their peace with it. He sat in front of his locker after the lineup was announced, answered questions in measured sentences, and said exactly one thing that will stay with you. I want to be used where I'm most needed. If this is where I'm most needed, I'm ready. There was no performance in it. No attempt to sound like a closer. He just sounded like a pitcher who had already decided. The Brewers, for their part, have not commented. They don't need to yet. The series hasn't started. The chess match is still in the phase where both managers are studying the board. But someone who watches this team closely noted something quietly: the Brewers now have to prepare for Sasaki twice. Once as a starter possibility. Once as the man standing on the mound in the 9th inning of a game they're trying to win. That's the kind of problem that doesn't have a clean solution. You can't fully prepare for a pitcher in 2 different roles simultaneously. Not in 48 hours. Not when his splitter behaves the way it behaves. Ohtani knew that when he said what he said in that hallway. Roberts knew it when he picked up the phone. By Thursday morning, when the Dodgers arrive at the park and the first game of the series becomes real rather than theoretical, all of this will either look like the beginning of something extraordinary or a story that gets revisited as a cautionary tale about moving too fast. But here is what we know right now. Dave Roberts has not made moves like this casually. His track record is not that of a manager who reshuffles everything on impulse. When he moves this fast, it is because something has come into focus for him that others haven't seen yet. And the thing that came into focus this time had Ohtani's fingerprints on it. Mookie Betts stood in that tunnel and said they never expected them to go this far. Maybe that's exactly the point. When you have Shohei Ohtani in your dugout, the distance between what's expected and what's possible keeps getting longer. And the Dodgers, it seems, are no longer interested in stopping anywhere in between. The Brewers have been warned. Whether they're ready for it is a different question entirely.